People are not going to give more money to the government in this cycle. And if you are a government agency and you're looking for more money this cycle, good luck to you. You better do a really good job of explaining what you're doing with it, why it's necessary, how you've worked to cut costs, because you know who's doing that right now? Your voters are.
And I do feel like we're in a moment in local government where people are extremely concerned with transparency and being heard and having a voice and things like that.
Once you said, I have nothing to hide, here's all the data available to you, it was very difficult for someone to say, you're hiding something. You're not. Like, you've asked a very simple question. What did they do with the money in 2022? And the answer is, they won't tell you. They're taking $57 million, boiling it down to 4 line items and saying, trust us. And that doesn't work.
Welcome back, everybody, to Unlocking the Law with your host, Brandon Grysko. That's me. This is a podcast where we tell authentic stories about the law, break down barriers you may have to working with attorneys, and explore topics of interest to businesses and communities. And we try to do this in a modest way, mix in a little bit of humor here and there. The podcast is brought to you, of course, and powered by the law firm of Fossone and Grysko. Joining me today is Matthew Wilk. As I understand it, a Northville dad. Attorney. He's in commercial real estate, and he's one of the driving forces behind Not Smart Wayne, which is a ballot question committee that is opposed to the Wayne County Transit millage proposal. Transparently, I don't know Matt, really, other than the few minutes before the camera started rolling here where we were talking. I know him a little bit by reputation. I'm excited to hear a little bit about his perspective related to the upcoming millage, and his group has now also filed a lawsuit over the millage and how it ended up on the ballot and some transparency issues and things like that. But before we dive into the substance of the episode, Matt, can you just say hi to the viewers and let everybody know who you are and what you do, and maybe just a couple little snippets about your background?
Yep. Brandon, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So I am I guess now 23-year resident in Northville Township. My paying job, as you indicated, has been in commercial real estate. I got out of the active practice of law several years ago, but I still dabble in it here and there. We all do. I say we're recovering attorneys, kind of like recovering alcoholics. You never quite get out of it. And one of the areas that I've been really working on for about the past decade or so is sort of local political issues and really diving deep into some of the local management. I used to sit on my school board. I spent 8.5 years on the Northville School Board, 2 terms. So I'm really familiar with schools and school-related stuff. Did that for a while. Still continue to do that. And very recently, we've been kind of tracking legislation as it affects our local community here in Northville Township and in the surrounding area. And when we came across this one, we were kind of shocked, and then the path took a series of turns that are, I think, a little bit difficult for the average listener to believe.
Interesting. So I guess I kind of have an order I want to go in here. Like, first, I want to talk about the general policy and sort of the development of where we've gotten to where we are today. And then, to the extent you can or want to talk about it, I'd like to talk a little bit about the lawsuit that you guys have filed. So can you explain for the listeners and for me, because candidly, this is not something that I've followed closely, if at all, other than just generally kind of being aware of it. So I haven't really dove into much of the details on it myself. But I guess the history of the millage, and by that, I mean, you hear about opt-out communities. And so that leads you to believe that there must be some communities that maybe opted in. So like, what is the history of all that, if you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. So starting back in 1994, communities in Wayne County in particular, and if you're familiar with state law, there's a whole bunch of state laws that say appeal to counties of greater than 1.5 million people, and really only applies to Wayne County.
There's only one.
Only one. So we have a law that we don't know what it is, but it's only one county. So in counties of more than 1.5 million people, the individual communities had the right to opt out of a regional transit system. Okay, so in this particular case, it was really driven by Detroit. The city of Detroit has DDOT. It is a system that is funded and operated solely within the city of Detroit itself. So
they had that right for many years. And for many years, 17 communities in Wayne County, including Detroit, opted out of that system. One of them, Livonia, originally opted in 1994. And then around 2005, they concluded, this bus system doesn't work for us. We're not getting the service we're looking for. The route lines are not where we're asking them to be. Thanks, but no thanks. And at the time, Mayor Jack Kirksey it traded that in an election for one millage for another. And the millage was going to be for local operating of what they now call live and go, and then some other public safety things. So as of 2020,
can I pause just for 1 second real quick before you finish that point? You said something interesting that I didn't really expect. You said that Detroit was an opt-out community.
Detroit is an opt-out community. Detroit does not.
They currently are.
They currently are. They do not participate. They are not taxed for the SMART system. They do not currently participate in the SMART system. Now, there are SMART buses that traverse through Detroit, but that's at SMART's election. SMART can do that. They don't need a city's permission sort of to run a bus line. It's a free country, right? But what they don't do generally is they don't run buses through places where the community doesn't pay taxes. So as of right now, and certainly as of 2024, there were 17 opt-out communities totaling about 1 million Wayne County residents. So 1 million Wayne County residents are opt-out, and a smaller percentage, which is 23 communities, but smaller communities, are opt-in.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit would be like half of that, right? Half of those million.
Correct. Give or take about half.
Interesting. Okay. Sorry, I know I interrupted you. I don't remember if you remember where you were at, but feel free to continue.
So the history is kind of important because one of the things that we get to is sort of what people think exists, right? And sometimes when you're in politics and you're very observant, you pay a lot of attention, you understand a lot of things, and then you think everyone else does too. And the reality is that's not how people make decisions. Certainly that's not how they make election decisions. So 2024 rolls around. Recall that the Democrats had a trifecta in Lansing. And by that, I mean the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. And they go to the 2024 election and they lose. All right. So as of January 1, 2025, they're going to lose the Michigan House. So they decide to do in their lame duck session, that's between election day and the end of the term, they are going to go hog wild with every thing that they want. Side note, this is, if you followed it, they went so wild that there were a bunch of bills that they just forgot to send to the governor. That's how crazy it was at the time. This was not. Yeah,
I think I'm not taking sides on the issue, but I think there's some bills that I don't know that they would characterize it that they forgot, or if it would be characterized maybe as like somebody just refused to do it. I think I've heard some controversy about that. I think that's actually up at the Supreme Court right now, isn't it?
It's really funny because it would be like a great episode of The Office or something. Like a pile of papers goes on someone's desk and they have to be done by noon on a day. And the guy looks down at his watch and says, "Oh man, I'm starving. I'm going to get something to eat." And he leaves. And by the time he gets back, he's out of a job. And therefore it's crazy.
It's Parks and Rec, bro. It's Parks and Rec. Have you ever seen that show?
Yes, exactly. Which shouldn't be happening in the state of Michigan government, but whatever. We'll be as. Okay, so this was not one of them. This was one they actually passed and signed and sent along. And what it did was, again, specifically for Wayne County, took away Wayne County communities' rights to opt out.
Okay, now that's another spot where I want to pause you, because where we had previously talked about the fact that this opt-out right applied to, residents in a county of a certain population, and if you do the math, you figure out that really Wayne County is the only one. So is this law now affecting just Wayne County?
Correct. House Bill 6088 was passed, and it only applies to Wayne County.
Interesting. Okay.
So for Wayne County,
go ahead. Finish up. Go ahead.
I would say, so for Wayne County residents and Wayne County residents only, you had the right previously in your local community to vote to opt in or opt out of the regional transit system. The state thought that would be a good idea to take it away.
Now, and I will say, because I have some listeners, and I think probably, a fair number are conservative, but I think I have some listeners that are on the, sort of left or liberal side of things as well. The lame duck concept that Matt is describing here is not something that's unique, of course, to Democrats, right? I mean, the Snyder administration did the same sorts of things, at the end of their terms and all that. So,
well, what's interesting about it is they do it.
There.
Yeah, what's interesting about it is they do it even when there isn't a change of power. There's just a change of people.
Right.
So
right.
So get group number one, and they're the ones that are they're the Speaker of the House and whatever. And for your listeners that don't know, in the state of Michigan, the Speaker of Houses has a great deal of authority to discharge bills from committees, bring bills to the floor without anybody else's approval, and to decide whether or not to bring votes. So it's a tremendous amount of power. It's akin to the United States House in many decades ago in the 1910s and 20s, and it's really it concentrates a lot of power in one person's seat. So
wow,
yes, absolutely. So anyway, they so after lame duck, they passed this law, and now with opt-outs taken away. Okay, all right, so that's where we are. That's where we were.
So they changed the law. So what concerns does that raise for you, I guess?
Well, the rest of the history gets much more interesting.
Okay.
All right. So the new law. So there's a group of us. I happen to run the Northville Republicans Club. I have my colleague, Patty Pozios, who runs the Plymouth Canton Republicans Club, and a bunch of other people in our area, Canton and downriver. This way the Michigan GOP sets up its county parties is along the lines of the congressional district. And it just so happens that the members of the 6th congressional district who are in Wayne County are almost entirely opt-out committees. There's only a few. So we all said, hey, look, we see this coming. We see what's coming, with flashing red lights. Hold on one second, please. Got something right there. And so we started paying attention to it. Like, where's this? When is it coming? And sort of nothing happened for most of 2025. And then you get to the end of 2025 and we start hearing sort of rumblings. Hey, I sit on the such and such city council, and Smart reached out to us and they want to give a presentation. Okay. So that becomes a thing. And they're running around town making these presentations, which they're not making public. They're just taking it sort of privately to each community. And under the guise of,
like sometimes communities will have, like, say at the beginning of their city council meeting, they'll have time set aside for special presentations or something. Is that what you mean?
Correct. Actually, these were even outside of meetings where they were like
really?
meeting
Okay.
with the township supervisor or the mayor.
Yeah. Okay. I got you.
Right.
Okay. All
right. So they start having these meetings, and it culminates really with Warren Evans, who is the Wayne County executive, doing his state of the county. And it's attended by a whole bunch of people that work for Wayne Evans. So there's always applause. It's not quite North Korean, but it's close. And he talks about this new transit push. It is one of the biggest things on his agenda. And that we're going to clean up transit in Wayne County, and we're going to have it go through all the communities, and it's going to fill in those gaps that exist according to him. Okay. So now we're really interested. Now we're really paying attention. So we start looking around, and I, as a lawyer, am trying to figure out sort of who does this? Who is the body that signs off on any of these things? Is it the Wayne County Commission? We have a local commissioner. Is it SMART? Is it RTA? Is it any of these? And the answer is, it turns out it isn't any of those entities. It turns out there is an entity called the Wayne County Transit Authority. And there's no record of anything about it basically anywhere. And the basically point is actually a very important one for our litigation. And oh, by the way, I'm happy to talk about the litigation because there's really no facts that are in any dispute at all. This is one of those situations where the government does a series of things and we say, you can't do that. And they didn't say this didn't happen. They say, well, we can do that. So I'm happy to talk about the facts and my interpretation of the facts. And it's going to matter what the judge has to say about it. But so there's an entity called the Wayne County Transit Authority. No one can find evidence of it anywhere.
So if you Google search Wayne County Transit Authority, you will be lucky if you dig hard enough, you will find reference on the Wayne County website to a meeting in 2022, which was timed as the time of their last millage, because the millage before was a 4-year millage.
So I've got a bit of what is nobody else will be interested in this except guys like us, because it's sort of a nerdy kind of a lawyer question. But what is the I guess organizational statute for a county transit authority? Do you know?
Sure.
Is there a
yes?
There's an MCL?
There is a very specific state law that allows for the creation of a transit authority. So it's
not SMART though, because SMART is presumably created by some type of interlocal agreement or something like that. I assume.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay.
Correct. So SMART is it covers 3 counties: Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and it is, you're right, it's a different transit authority than the Wayne County. It turns out SMART itself does not have the ability to put a millage on. Nope, it has not. No, they do. They do right now. They have a millage in the opt-in communities of Wayne County, the what used to be opt-in communities of Oakland County, and because they had a little something we'll talk about in 2022. It's important to part of our messaging, and Macomb County for 30 years. But the entity that has the authority to put a tax on the ballot in Wayne County is the Wayne County Transit Authority.
Okay, so just to make sure I get this straight, you know better than anybody probably, but the election code in Michigan, which plays into this, I'm sure at some level, you've got these different just for my listeners too, you've got different statutes that will say, okay, you can have a public library, you can have a district library, you can have a county transit authority. And those statutes themselves will say, and you have authority to go out for millage, and you have authority to go out for millage, and so do you. And then there's also a probably 100 or 200 page election code in Michigan that will detail how you get local ballot questions on and things like that. It's all very arcane and very confusing and probably needs to be redone, quite frankly. But I don't know that there's any willpower to get that to happen. So you're saying that SMART does have the ability to place a millage in opt-in communities?
I think it was there. I think it's actually there. Now I'm going to mix it up more. There's another entity called RTA.
Sure.
And I think RTA is the one that in may have been 22 or 16 or 18, right around then, they put we're going to do a multi-county wide millage, and it failed. So instead of having, because in order for, I think it was pursuant to an interlocal agreement, because it had to pass in all 3 counties. And I think it passed in Wayne, it passed in Oakland, and it failed in Macomb. So it failed overall. And it was just more money to expand the transit system. So there's this interlaced set of bodies that handle this stuff. And a lot of times, as far as we can tell, the Wayne County Transit Authority doesn't do anything with the money, but take it in and then immediately hand it to SMART. There you go. Exactly. And why do we have this? Why do we have this body that just does nothing other than this? And that's the idea is the Michigan election law provides for certain things that have to be done in order to put something on the ballot. And interestingly, in our case, it turns out there's also things that have to be done specifically when you want to put a property tax. And that's under what's called the Michigan General Property Tax Act. If you go in there, it's tucked in deep in the innards of the Michigan General Property Tax. There's rules about what you can and can't do. And that's sort of, we sort of got to the point in February where we're like, okay, we think we know what the body is going to be, but we can't find anything about it. We can't even find who's on this board, because we were going to do, the idea originally was we were going to do the kind of the American way, right? We're going to get a group of people together and we're going to go down to this body and we're going to complain about
the millage and say, hey, you got to figure out a different way. But if you think that the government is going to voluntarily like give you this information, you probably haven't dealt with very many governments in the past. So in February of this year, we started really poking around because Warren Evans said this is our priority. It's going to be on the ballot. Okay. Well, who put it on the ballot? And so we could not find anything. And I sent a FOIA, said, hey, I'd like to know about this entity. And I'd like to know its past, its members, its history. And particularly, I'd like to know about any future meetings. Do you have any future meetings planned? Because it's not available anywhere on the website as far as I can tell. There's 2022 data, but nothing from 2026. And they've being who they are, they stall. And then they come back and finally they say, here you go. And here's all this information about the members. It's run by a gentleman by the name of Asad Turfi. He is a deputy executive of Wayne County. Never met the guy. By the way, we have no information responsive to your request about future meetings. Okay. Maybe they don't have it planned quite yet. So have me sitting on the couch, and the algorithms of social media are very, very good. So I get notice on somebody else's Twitter page. It's a pro-transit group. Congratulations. The Wayne County Transit Authority is putting this millage on the ballot in August. What? Wait a minute. They had a meeting? When was the meeting? I asked specifically about future meetings. You fulfilled my request on March the 5th. This message was on March the 19th, 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later.
So do you think they just scheduled it after they fulfilled your request, or whether
No, I think I think it would be. I am pretty sure, and they didn't give us, like, for example, Asad Turfi's calendar. Right? That was provided to me. So in the FOIA, what does it get provided in the litigation? It depends on which way it goes. I find it virtually impossible that this government body on March the 5th had no idea when they were meeting, and on March 19th met and approved ballot language. Normally, and this is important to a couple of things, if you are a public body in Michigan, and you and I both know this, you are subject to what's called the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Okay? So what the Open Meetings Act requires is two very important things. First of all, meetings of a public body have to be conducted in the public. Okay? You cannot have meetings in the private. There's exceptions for closed session and things like that. And what you cannot do, for example, is have a majority of a body sit down at lunch, 4 members of a 7-member township, and then approve something, and then go into a board meeting and then approve it formally where you had the discussion in private. You cannot do that. That is against the law.
Yeah, and actually, I've done research on the Open Meetings Act and its development for an article that I was considering writing. And I think actually it used to be the case that the law was that you had to you had to make the formal decision in public. And so at the time that the Open Meetings Act was adopted, which repealed the old law and put the Open Meetings Act in place, they were having concerns associated with groups essentially meeting privately and then just basically saying, okay, well, now that we've hashed out all the details, we're just going to go into public session and we'll make the formal decision in public. And I think I'd have to go back and check my notes on this, but this was from actually some of the formal legislative history associated with the Open Meetings Act was sort of detailing this problem that's had, which actually, as it turns out, is a problem that apparently still exists constitutionally with Michigan's various universities.
That is correct.
More on that on a different episode, perhaps.
Yes, absolutely. I follow that one very closely, too. By the way, I have a very good friend who is a Michigan trustee, and he is in the
perhaps a mutual friend.
Perhaps a mutual friend. And I am a proud University of Michigan grad, and I took everything to not say, hey, guys, this is
This is not what.
So I don't want to. Well, let's not segue too far into that. But I guess before we get too much farther into the weeds of the lawsuit, because I understand some concerns about transparency, whether or not what we call sunshine laws. So FOIA and Open Meetings Act are often sort of termed in the broad sense as sunshine laws because it's supposed to shine light on, government or whatever. I want to talk first about what policy concerns do you have with the millage? Like, why should people, in your mind, be concerned about giving money to I guess it would be the Wayne County Transit Authority, which would then pass that money off to SMART? Like, why is public transportation in that sense a bad idea?
Well,
I guess I don't know how I would frame that. Yeah.
Great question. Public transportation is not a bad idea. Okay. And what we found interesting is we started with the research around this question. How many people are on the average SMART bus? Okay. And it turns out that SMART publishes a number very proudly that they call passenger miles. And it's about 48 million and change passenger miles in the last year they reported, which is 2024. They do not have their 2025 numbers out yet. But that doesn't tell you enough information because 100 passenger miles could be 100 passengers going 1 mile or one passenger going 100 miles or anything in between. You can't find out that information. And the other necessary number is nowhere on SMART's website, but it is reported to the Federal Department of Transportation. So we got a copy of it. And according to the Federal Department of Transportation, the number of what they call vehicle revenue miles, which is like your odometer, is about 12.5 million. So when you do the math, when you take the one and divide it by the other, the average number of people on a SMART bus is approximately 3.88. The average SMART bus has less than 4 people on it.
And have you been able to confirm that that's the proper way to do that calculation? Through any official government sources? Or?
No, I will tell you, it's funny because they started to try to say your math is wrong. But then when they started to do their own math, it was so wrong that we knew we were right. Like so I guess give us the other side of it. Give us a little devil's advocate. Like, how are they saying to calculate this or to figure this out? Well, they were saying, they're not denying our number. What they were saying is, the average bus has 26 people. Well, the average bus route is approximately 50 miles, 25 miles there, 25 miles back. And the average route length, the average length of a rider, which they also publish and don't talk about anywhere, is about 8+ miles. Okay. So if you have a 50-mile route, and you take 3.88 people, and they travel 8 miles and they switch off, and they travel 8 miles and they switch off, you get approximately 20-some people on the bus. But our math isn't wrong. Every single bus, if you look at it with your eyes, you will see on average 3.88 people or less, which leads an average person to the following question. Why are we using a bus? Right? You don't need a bus to carry 3 people in my scenario or in theirs, right? You could do it with a van or something else. And so when you do that, when you come to that conclusion, and it's mathematically irrefutable, okay? No one has tried to refute the math because they can't refute the math. All they can do is change the subject. So when you come to that conclusion, you're led to 3 other things. First of all, it does not improve traffic. If you take a bus off the system, take 3 cars out of the system and add a bus is about 3 times as long as a car. Buses are slower to react. They have to stop at railroad crossings. It does not reduce traffic. When you take 3 cars off the road and you add a bus, it actually makes potholes worse. A bus is about 6 to 7 times as heavy as a passenger vehicle. And the smog is worse because a bus emits 6 to 10 times, depending on your measurement, the amount of smog as a car.
See, that's interesting. So I think that's interesting because, I don't know. Just a layman, right? Not a layman in the sense of like I'm an attorney, but a layman in the sense of like I'm not deep into, transit policy or anything like that. But just as a layman, I think to myself, like, okay, are there really that many buses on the road that it's going to make such a significant difference in either emissions or potholes or traffic? I feel like a sort of a layperson like myself would think like, it probably doesn't make that big of a difference. What do you think about that?
Well, what I think the average layperson does is when they got this information, it was verified by their own eyes. Mm-hmm. One of the things, if you notice, that buses all universally smart have blacked out windows. Well, it's to prevent UV rays, as if we didn't know what UV rays were like 10 years ago. And it comports with people's eyes. And we say this all the time when we're proposing on this issue. So my colleague, Patty Pozios, her family is Greek, and they emigrated in the 1950s. And her dad would take a bus every day from where they lived in St. Clair Shores down to Detroit, to American Coney Island, to work for the Caros family, because they didn't own a car and he didn't speak any English. Okay, it has a necessity. When that was in place, however, Detroit averaged 13,500 people per square mile. It's now closer to 5. In the suburban communities, it's much, much less. So a transit system like that works well. I lived in Chicago for 6 years. Works well when it's a very dense community. Detroit isn't anymore, and our suburbs never have been.
So we're too kind of sprawled out, in your opinion, then, for this to really make sense.
For fixed bus lines to work, that's correct. Now, we're Detroit. We're the home of moving people from place to place. One would think there would be better ideas with apps and AI and whatever. So if you are in Detroit or anywhere else,
I do have. Go. Oh, sorry. Let finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Well, and you want to go from point A to point B, there should be a way to do it easily, on time, and efficiently. And unfortunately, for some of my people on the other side of the transit issue, it's not fixed line buses running down a major mile road. That's not how you do it.
Mm-hmm. So I had heard, and I honestly, I can't remember all the details of this. I wish I did. I had heard some comments about like, well, we have these like micro transit opportunities, or like if you drive by Plymouth and Stark in Livonia, sometimes you'll see like a little micro transit. I think it's a smart car, like not a smart car, how you're thinking of it, but like a smart bus, but like a car or something that sometimes is parked back there between like the Wendy's and the budget truck rental place. And so, I mean, is there a proposal to incorporate some type of micro transit associated with this millage, or do you know anything about that?
Sure. There's actually two parts to what you're talking about. First of all, many communities that are opt-out have their own senior transit systems. Okay.
Yeah,
Northville
that I'm a little bit familiar with.
Okay. Yeah. So Northville has Northville Connections. Plymouth has what they call Plymouth Senior Transit. Livonia has Live and Go, et cetera. Now, those systems get a small check from Smart. Smart will help them buy buses and sometimes help them maintain the buses. That's a different story that I don't have inside information about. But they're very heavily like the seniors dive into how this is done, right? I used to sit on my seniors commission and they're like, wow, should it be $3 or $4? And Mary didn't show up at her last thing, so maybe we should cut Mary out of it, right? It's insane. But look, it's a service that we provide, and Northville Township and City of Northville happily provided it, right? And we lost, I don't know, maybe $100,000 a year or something doing it, whatever. That's what it's for. Okay. The second one is oh, by the way, very important to note that of the $57 million per year that this tax is going to bring in, less than 1%, $550,000 is allocated towards that purpose, spread across all, however many, 1 point whatever million residents in Wayne County. So they're not even making a very good effort to try to fund that. The other side is something that they call flex zones and micro transit and stuff like that, which is something that they are trying to do. It's just not very successful. Okay. Of like an Uber style or something.
So let's dive into that just a little bit. Because I don't know that people really have heard very much about this. I mean, I know I have, I don't even want to call it an inside track, but I've heard a little bit more about it because I've been involved with the Livonia Westland Chamber of Commerce. And so, different folks have come out and talked to us about things in the past. But is it not successful because they don't have the funding, and this millage is something that would then go to making it successful?
No, they are not planning on using the bulk of this millage money
to go to microtransit. The bulk of this money, I think the chart said something like 80+% is going to additional fixed bus lines. In order to sell it, right, in order to sell it to these communities, and they hoped to go around to the communities and get their support for this concept. So what they did is they drew a map and said, what we're going to do is we're going to have all these great new bus lines. And for example, there's going to be one that goes up and down Haggerty. There's going to be one that goes up and down Northville Road, one along 7 Mile that goes east-west, one along Plymouth Road that goes east-west, and then some dipping into sort of the downriver area. That's what they think they need to sell this program. So that's what they've promised, and that's what they focused on. We found another piece of information, unfortunately, that does not help their cause. In 2022, SMART did the same to Oakland County when they were pitching their millage. They walked around town with a map, which we have a copy of. We actually have a copy of a video of one of the biggest pro-transit people talking about the map and all these great new bus lines they were going to get in Oakland County. They included a bus to Oxford, a bus to Great Lakes Crossing, down the Western Lakes region, up and down Orchard Lake Road. Okay? What do those 4 lines have in common in 2026? They don't exist. 4 years hence, 4 years after the Oakland County 2022 millage, those promises have not been kept. That was startling to us. We looked at the map and we said, wait a minute, what? And we drew a map and say, hey, these lines in dark red, these are the blue ones that they did develop. These lines in dark red don't exist.
So are they, in your view then, are they developing lines just other than what they said, or are they not investing the funds in the transit routes at all? Or like, where's it going, I guess, in your view?
Well, that's a great question. I had a very Facebook post that went, I don't know, viral is the wrong word. I don't like that word, but a lot of people looked at it. And one of the people that looked at it was Dave Woodward, who is the chair of the Oakland County Commission. And he said, well, you're lying. And I said, well, okay, which of these 4 lines exists? And then after a little bit of back and forth, he said, well, they got other things. And people who are in this things, what other things? And so it wasn't clear that they actually delivered anything, or did they just pour money into the system that did the existing system and absorb new costs, and it didn't work. Like, for example, you're an attorney, I'm an attorney. SMART gets sued a lot. They are
it's a borderline professional business model, right? Is, hey, let's see, maybe the bus started a little too quick or stopped a little too fast and somebody tumbled out of their seat. And I've got a whole law practice maybe geared towards signing those people up and suing a quasi-governmental agency, right? I mean,
not a maybe. What if I told you if you go to one of the largest personal injury attorney law firms, there's a drop-down box.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all. Honestly, it really doesn't. I mean, right, that sort of thing happens all the time, for sure.
It's a big number. Yeah. You and I were talking earlier about pensions. SMART has a pension hole. It's somewhere between $20 and $72 million. So,
see, that is interesting to me because I do a fair bit of work in labor and employment stuff, and so things like, what level of funding does your pension system have? And do you have OPEB costs and legacy costs? And what percentage are those things funded at? Or just kind of intellectually stimulating questions for me. So I'd be interested to know just offhand.
Yeah, we're all waiting for the 2025 report. The part doesn't come out until June. They're really far behind. They're about a year behind. So the last report is as of June of 2024. So They haven't. So it's somewhere between. They put a budget out that made it look like it was 20. The audited report in 2024 said 72. So I've been saying somewhere between 20 and 72. I don't know.
72% funded?
No, $1 million hole.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's between 20 and $72 million hole. So they took this money, they plowed it into God knows what, and now they're coming to Wayne County and making the same set of promises. Right. And if you look at
millage funds do have to be used for the purpose that they were accumulated for, right? So if the ballot, just as an example, if the ballot language says, police and fire, you can't turn around and stick that into, sanitation or something like that without a pretty clever, legal argument, right, as to how those things are related. So theoretically, there must be some nexus. At least if they're doing it legally, there would be some nexus between what the ballot language said at the time in Oakland County, presumably that they passed the millage, and then what they're using the funds for. Correct.
Now, what the other thing that we found that was fascinating was how much does it cost SMART to move a person a mile? All that data is available. And the answer is $3.70 to move one person 1 mile. So a person, let's say I'm a light car driver. I drive my car 10,000 miles a year. I don't, but let's say I'm that person. In order for SMART to move me 10,000 miles, it costs them $37,000 a year. Again, mathematically irrefutable. So the costs of this stuff are going up, and they're not.
Does that cost take into account? It probably takes into account things like labor and fuel, but does it take into account things like benefits and different things like that? So that's a total. That's an all-in kind of number.
They spend all the money they get, right? So that their revenue and their expenses are equal to their revenue. And when you divide their expenses by the number of miles they move a person, right, the number of passenger miles, you get $3.70. That's what it costs them.
Now, is that a number that they would agree with? Do you think?
It's funny. I've put out a lot of numbers, and they don't disagree with any of them. The one they disagreed with was the 3.88 people, and they just came up with another number which was not the same, which was the number of people that ride a bus along its entirety of its route, that's not what you would see with your eyes. You don't see sort of collectively. And they came up with this narrative like, well, people are just getting on and getting off the bus, and there's lots and lots of them. To which I said, actually, you do report the average ride length that it's 8.25 miles or something like that. And then it's like, change the subject. Like, what? But people really need it. There's a lot of policy reasons why this is poor. And I'm a strong believer in this. It's very, very difficult to incentivize a government to act more efficiently. Okay. There are a group of people who feel that it is a good use of your and my money to create what they call a good job. And in this particular instance, a good job is a bus going up and down, say, Grand River Avenue, of which I have a lot of people that have offices there. And the bus is functionally empty all the time. Mm-hmm. But that's a good job, Brandon. This person is a bus driver, and they get a good salary, and they get benefits, and they get a pension, and that we don't want to get rid of that. And it's very, very difficult to incentivize the government to say we need to not do that. For example, Oakland County, this is great. I had a great vignette. Sorry to go a little bit off. So Oakland County has double connected buses. They're connected with, like, they call them accordion buses. And I talked to somebody who's in the know in Oakland County. He said, well, do you know why we have those? I said, why? Because the buses are empty there too. They said because they needed to promote people, and so they could get more pay. So they got new buses so they could promote people to be bus drivers of accordion buses, which is harder than a regular bus. So that's how the government operates. It wastes your money. And in today's day and age, today, with people facing expenses that are going up, is this what we want to do? Do we want to incentivize this? And you can't get the government to change what they're doing if every time they ask for more money, you say yes, right? I've worked on a lot of I've helped people across the state analyze and review school millages. And one of the best, most enlightening things that happens in the process of a school millage is its first defeat. When it gets its first defeat, the people that run these things, and generally by and large, they're well-intended, they then say, hey man, let's look through each line item. And instead of viewing it as sort of a benefit we can give to a voter cross-section to get this passed, we say, do we need it? Is this what we need? And you've talked about this as far as in a partisan lens, or we've talked about how it is not a partisan issue. In the last recent election cycles, 2 very large millages have gone down, one in Livonia and one in Troy. Those are not hard red areas, not by any.
Yes, and the Livonia one specifically, and you may be referring to an episode of mine that recently dropped with Jim Biga, who ran the, or at least was heavily involved in the Vote No campaign for the bond proposal in Livonia. He describes that his group has people that are, he didn't maybe say this exactly, but, you've got MAGA Republicans probably in there. You've got more libertarian leaning people in there. You've got Dems in there. You've got liberals in there. So there are a cross section of people. So it does appear not to be a strictly partisan issue. And in particular, Livonia is like, I guess what I would consider purple at this point. I always kind of thought it was maybe more on the conservative side of things, but lately, it sort of has seemed otherwise. Now, and I think with that, would you say like your group, or maybe not your group proper, but of the people that are opposed to the millage, do you have both sides?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You do?
Yeah, no question. People are not going to give more money to the government in this cycle, right? That is not a thing. And if you are a government agency and you're looking for more money this cycle, good luck to you. You better do a really good job of explaining what you're doing with it, why it's necessary, how you've worked to cut costs, because you know who's doing that right now? Your voters are. Voters are. This is not the time. And it was true if you had the long discussion about the Troy millage, there was a lot of conversations, and it was not a right-left issue. There were members of city council who were otherwise right, who supported it, otherwise left, who supported it. And there were people who were sitting and I know a lot of them that were sitting in some of these meetings, and they have never voted for the same person ever. And they were sitting next to each other with the same thing in mind. And I think as you get locally, there's a lot of issues like that. This one doesn't have to do really, and we stress this. This is not, is public transit a good idea? That's not the question we have here. We understand that there are some people, and we make a distinction with Detroit. We use Detroit as an example. So Detroit in this particular matter will be faced with the double tax. Detroit is already taxed for DDOT. It comes out of their 19 mil operating millage, and they fund it to the tune of about 180, 190 million. And there's an argument of it should be more, should it be less, should we do this, should we do that? That's for Detroiters to decide. But for Detroiters, it is a unique double tax. For 650,000 people who live in Detroit, they're now going to get double taxed.
Detroit, you're talking about in some cases, those are the lower income people, right?
Yes.
Essentially,
yes. And they have a different way of, if I'm running this, if I'm Elon Musk or I'm Jeff Bezos, aren't I developing an app that allows one of these vans to go up and down the side streets and pick some up at their front door and take them where they need to go? But that's it. That's because they have a different perspective on it. Yes, they do need public transit, but you can't just lump everything in and say this thing solves all problems. People aren't looking for that now. They want you to dig in, this was one of the things that really turned us on how we're going to handle this issue. A bunch of my group went to 2 or 3 presentations from a consultant that was hired by 7 communities in Western Wayne County, and they were hired to provide guidance to SMART as to where they would like bus lines to be. So, okay, let's just assume for the benefit of the doubt that we're going to do new bus lines. Where would they be? And we were in a community that was where all 7 council members are Democrats. We were in a community where all 7 council members were Republicans, 2 different communities. They all asked very good questions. And they asked the consultant, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea or a better idea if the route went here instead of there? And many times the consultant said, yeah, we raised that, but they won't do that. Like, for example, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a singular bus route that runs from Western Wayne County to the airport? I don't
know. It seems reasonable, I guess. I have no idea, though.
Yeah, but they're not going to do that. Wait, who's running the ship here? What again, All the Democrats
So this is
are
a consultant hired by Smart or hired by the communities?
hired by the communities to liaise with Smart. A big company. And the woman did a great job. She put a ton of work into it, dug into sort of where, her demographic information was way off, but whatever. What was fascinating to me was their lack of saying, we'll do what you want. For like, one of them was, hey, isn't it a good idea maybe to run the bus a little bit further down Michigan Avenue, get into Washtenaw County, so if someone needs it, they can link up with AATA and do that. Nope, we won't do that. We won't do that. Why? Because they don't have any incentive to do that. They don't have to listen to you. All they want out of you is a yes vote so we can take more of your tax dollars. And I will tell you that, like we talked about with schools, like we're talking about with Livonia and Troy, that does not fly in 2026. People want to know, before you take money out of my wallet, what's it going for? And have you listened to me?
I have seen that. I have 100% seen that. And I think that was, you wouldn't have by chance watched my episode that just dropped yesterday with Jim Bigga, did you?
I did not, but
okay.
Go
listen to it, because he raises a lot of the same types of transparency concerns. And I do feel like we're in a moment in local government where people are extremely concerned with transparency and being heard and having a voice and things like that. And I'm kind of torn on that, quite frankly, Matt, because, we don't live in a society where everybody gets a vote on every issue, right? We live in a society where we elect representatives, and for better or for worse, they make the choices. Now, we do have some issues like taxes and bond proposals and things like that have to come back to the voters. But if there's something that we've already empowered our local government to do through their executive branch and through their legislative branch, then they can do it. They comply with the Open Meetings Act. They have to hear the public comment on it, but they can do it. I feel like we're almost in a moment where the loudest voices are saying like, yeah, but where's my vote on this? And it's like, well, you don't actually get a vote on this. It's a good thing you don't get a vote on this, because the government wouldn't be able to do anything at all if everybody just got to sort of bureaucratically kind of ad nauseum sort of demand more meetings and more engagement and more of that. And you're never going to get anything done, because you're just going to constantly be having meetings and talking, and there's not going to be any action taking place.
Well, okay, let me push back on a couple things. Okay,
sure,
first
please.
of all, the Open Meetings Act, I do training on Open Meetings Act for school board members. The Open Meetings Act is a minimum, not a maximum. You can always be more open than the Open Meetings Act. Okay. Number two, and I'll give you a vignette from when I was on my school board. We passed a bond on our school board. And this is Northville. We have a ton of overeducated people in every different field. It's amazing. You pull someone out of the woodwork and they have a 20-year career in some arcane thing that's right on point. And they will tell you when you were doing something wrong. So one of the things we did when we did our bond was we did a series of hyperlinks. Okay. So when you went on the bond, you get a copy of this is all before it went to the vote. Here's a copy of the list of the things that we think we're going to do with the money. Each and every one of them had a number associated with. This is $4 million. And the number wasn't picked out of thin air. It was picked with the assistance of our owner's rep and our largest contractor. Not that he had been picked to do the work, but he just gave me a number. And when you clicked on that, there would be even more detail. Here's a detailed description of what we asked for, what we expect the project to be. And one of the things that happened, which we found is fascinating, is when you did that, the number of people that actually looked at it was a very small number. But the number of people who appreciated that it was there in the first place was a disarmingly large number. Once you said, I have nothing to hide, here's all the data available to you, it was very difficult for someone to say, you're hiding something. You're not. And on a very rare occasion, we'd have somebody come in and say, hey, I looked at project 13 on your list and I think it's all wrong because I do a this. Like one of them was, one time we had a guy comes into a board meeting and says, hey, you're doing this parking lot restructuring and it is entirely wrong. And I know that because I am a 25-year traffic flow engineer, and I'd be happy to volunteer my services to the district to fix your problem. And we said, could you come over to the front, please? And he did, and it worked, and it was amazing. But when you are that open, you don't have people saying, what do you have to hide? Like, you've asked a very simple question. What did they do with the money in 2022? And the answer is, they won't tell you. What are they doing the money on with this? They're taking $57 million, boiling it down to 4 line items and saying, trust us. And that doesn't work. And no one's going to believe him.
So I have had conversations with people that suggest that they think that this is a done deal. Not that they, in fact, in these conversations, they actually don't like the millage, the people that I've spoken with, but they think it's kind of a done deal. They think it's just going to pass anyway because of maybe it's the political machine that's behind it or something. I'm not really sure what the reason is for that. But what do you think about that? I mean, do you think this is just kind of destined to pass?
Well, we'll see on Monday. So Monday we have a court hearing. So
okay.
Let me touch on a couple of things vis-a-vis our lawsuit. So
let's go to the lawsuit because we're at 55 minutes, and I don't want to keep you too long on a Saturday morning here when we're recording. So
that's okay.
Let's get to the lawsuit.
So the lawsuit covers OMA. Okay, Open Meetings Act. There's a clear Open Meetings Act violation here. Their counter argument, and I'll be fair to them, is that they posted their meeting location, they allege to have posted it in a building that they say is sufficient to post it. We point out very politely that building is likely the 3rd or 4th most used building by Wayne County. It's not listed on Wayne County's website anywhere, so posting such a notice is not legally sufficient. It would require a person, if they wanted to know about the meeting, to travel to a series of buildings in Wayne County every single day just to see if a notice showed up.
Now, was the notice posted anywhere on the website, either at the time of, before, or subsequent to the meeting?
No and no. And by their own admittance, it was not. But the bigger claims we talk about are about the ballot language itself. Okay, when they did approve this, and we sort of thought it was coming because they literally cut and pasted the 2022 Oakland County language and made it the Wayne County language.
Plagiarism is the sincerest form of flattery, I think, is what we've said in the legal profession a time or two.
Exactly. They asked AI, and AI gave them the same, like cut and pasted somebody else's work.
Could be that.
Exactly. So the state law requires 2 things in the Michigan Election Code, and they're copied a little bit in the Michigan General Property Tax Act, but the Michigan Election Code is very clear. When you have a ballot question, you must have language that is not prejudicial.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay? So, for example, if you are running a bus service and you allocate less than 1% of the money you're collecting under that bus service to be given to communities to run senior transit programs, you cannot tell the world the money is being used for seniors, veterans, and the disabled. You also cannot say that people are using buses for very, very good things when there's no requirement that they use them for just those good things. They could use it for anything. So if you said, I'm going to have this money is going for buses that will drive people to commit crimes, that would be prejudicial against the ballot. And if you said, I'm going to allow people, this is for bus service to drive the little sisters of the poor to church, that would be prejudicial for it. In our case, this language says it's to drive people to healthcare and education. There's no requirement that people use it for healthcare or education. Why are you picking healthcare and education?
Okay, so let me just pick that apart just a little bit. So if this were I think some communities have senior-only transportation, right? So it would be appropriate to say that this is for senior transportation if that were the case.
Right. And if you were giving let's say you were doing your own local millage and you were funding, like they did in Livonia.
Right.
Livonia put a 6/10 mill out there, and it was for what is now called Live and Go. Okay. It's going all to Live and Go. It's going to Live and Go. Here's what Live and Go does. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sure. No problem. But what you don't get to do is say, this is going to, if it was going 99% to something and then 1% to live and go and then say, well, here's what it's going to. And then you list all the live and go great things that it's doing. Right. And it's clearly prejudicial. It's clearly prejudicial. Their argument is, well, we're required to say all the uses. All? You just listed healthcare and education. All is a lot of things. So it's not that. So that is a clear violation of the Michigan election law. Interestingly, as far as I know, when you put something on the ballot at the state level, you send it to the state board of elections, and they can and do change the wording of your ballot question to comply with that particular law. Okay, you'll see either one or two on the ballot in 2026. Citizens Only Voting and Mop Up Michigan have both submitted signatures, and they will both submit proposed ballot language, and the state board of elections will say, you can't say that. You got to say
they can actually change the language?
They can and do change the language.
That does not happen at the local level as far as I've ever experienced. I mean, your clerk, if it's a city or a township or whatever, like your clerk just sends it in and that's what goes on, I think.
Correct.
Yeah. Unless it's a charter amendment. Charter amendments have to go to the governor's office and the attorney general's office. But
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So the question is, who reviewed this language? And the answer is, nobody reviewed this language. It still has to comply with the law. But how did you, I'm a lawyer. If I have someone writing something that has to comply with the law, I would say maybe we take that piece of paper and send it and put it in front of a lawyer and have him say, hey, man, yeah, this is okay. Or, hey, you can't do this. But no one really did that. So the language is clearly prejudicial.
I'd say, I don't know. I haven't looked at it in detail. I'd be a little on the fence with that, but I'm open to being convinced either way.
Okay. I would, my argument is.
Your argument is it's prejudicial. I get that.
Yeah, it's prejudicial, right? Like if you
it's
said we're funding a bus service and we're giving the money to DDOT and SMART and you left it at that, it probably wouldn't be prejudicial. That's what you're doing.
I think you can take examples like we've done kind of here, right? And you can come up with examples that obviously comply and that obviously don't comply. And maybe there's some play in between. But let me ask you this. Is this a fact question or is this a question of law? And you know why that matters. And
it's going to be a question of law because the language itself is the fact and it's not in dispute. The language is what the language is. It's going to be a matter.
But the fact of whether or not it's prejudicial, is that a fact question or a law question?
I guess we'll see what the judge has to say on that.
We'll see what the judge says.
I don't know the answer to that question. It's a fascinating question.
So for the listeners, the reason why that matters is because if you have a question of fact, then it has to go to a fact finder, like in a trial type situation, which oftentimes will be a jury. If it's a question of law, however, then it's something that the judge can decide just on a motion, basically, based on sort of the plain language maybe of the ballot and things like that. So the distinction does really matter. But there's also these kind of weird situations where it may be a question of fact, but a judge can look at it and say, okay, well, it's a question of fact, but it's just so obviously one way or the other way that no reasonable jury would be able to disagree with me anyways. And so therefore, I'm just going to decide it myself regardless on a motion.
Correct.
So who knows what's going to happen? I am interested to hear about. I almost wish we had done this interview after the Monday court hearing. And this episode, by the way, won't drop, unfortunately, until after that. But I'm interested to find out what happened with it. So
we'll see how we do on our estimations. So the second part of the language that is fascinating and that they did not make an attempt to work around is the question of the opt-outs. So there's two particular laws. One is the Michigan General Property Tax Act says, when you put a ballot question on, you cannot put a renewal and an increase in the same question. Okay, so if you go for a renewal and then an increase, you have to ask two separate questions under the Michigan General Property Tax Act. How does that overlay with this situation with opt-in and opt-out? That's a great question. It is a completely novel question of law. There's been no interpretation of that statutory section anywhere. And it's a very novel situation because it applies basically in one county where you had opt-out and now you have opt-in.
But in this case, the Wayne County Transit Authority would just be a new millage, wouldn't it?
Correct. One would think it would be a new millage, right? Which goes to this, really the more important one is ballot language must not be unclear, okay, or misleading. So my analogy is this. Let's say I live in an apartment complex and there's a bad fire and there's the garage is burned down, and there's a 20-car garage and 5 cars were in it and they burned down. And I say, I am going to replace the cars that are burned in this fire. Okay. You, me, and everybody would understand that to be the 5 cars that are burned up are replaced with 5 new cars. Nobody would say that means everybody gets a car, whether they owned one or not prior to the fire. That is not a common everyday use of the word replace. The word replace is to substitute for something that already exists or existed prior to the matter, the incident at hand. Okay? And this is very important. And I'll tell you why. Because the average voter often does not know what's on their tax bill. They don't walk into the ballot box and say, okay, I see this one here. I'm okay with this. And I don't see this one here. I'm not okay with that. So when the people read the ballot language, the first question they often have is this something I'm already paying or not? Because renewals pass at a much higher rate.
Yeah, I can see that. People are more likely to say, okay, look, I'm already paying this anyway. Just go ahead and renew it, and we'll just kind of continue status quo.
Correct.
I can see that.
Now, they could not use the word renew, so they chose the word replace. Interestingly, what they didn't choose was to be honest. And honestly would have been, in the following communities, it's a new tax. And in the following communities, it's a renewal of an existing tax. That would have been the honest answer. And the reader could have looked at it and said, I live in Northville Township. This for me is a new tax, and here is how I vote. They chose not to do that. They chose to use the word, again, I suspect, without running it by an attorney, just use the word replace. The problem is to replace, you violate the common everyday meaning. Because I, as a Northville Township resident, we have several affidavits from our plaintiffs to this effect. If they are in an opt-out community and they were in the ballot box and they saw the word replace, they would think that they are substituting one millage for an existing one they are already paying. They're not. You can't do that. Now, we've made it very clear in our filings and in our messaging. Wayne County can put this on the ballot for residents. They have to follow the rules. Okay? They don't allow the question, and we're going to nerd out a little bit, is the question in election law of what they call substantial compliance. Okay? I did most of what you require of me, not all of what you require of me. Is that okay? And what the average person finds fascinating about substantial compliance is, why don't you try substantial compliance with the IRS?
Yeah, it is. It is kind of interesting that in the election context, it's really more like strict compliance. And you've seen that with, hey, such and such judge got thrown off the ballot because they forgot to check a box on, you know what I mean, some form that they submitted when they registered to file for the reelection. And so you've actually seen that in Wayne County, I think, where you've got judges that have been judges for some period of time, and then somebody gets them kicked off the ballot because of some technicality. And that kind of happens pretty regularly in a sense, right?
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example of someone who it happened to. Michael Duggan. Mike Duggan was kicked off the ballot, recall, because he filled out his form improperly. And then he was forced to, before he was elected, to be a write-in candidate.
That's when he ran. That's right. You know, I forgot that's why he ran as a write-in candidate. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Because he got kicked off the ballot for failing substantial compliance. So in this particular case, I would argue, and we will argue in court on Monday, substantial compliance is simply not enough. In an election context where you're asking voters to decide on a ballot initiative, it's not enough. And I'll raise one more thing because I suspect we're getting short on time.
We are, but I want to say a couple more things if you can give me another few minutes. But go ahead.
You got it, for sure.
Okay.
So the question that we have gotten and we get and is in the Wayne County's briefs is, well, let the voters decide. And it turns out there's one legal example and one practical example of why that's not the right way to go. The legal example is there's a case. It is appears to be the precedent-setting case on this question involving Royal Oak and a marijuana initiative. The language of the marijuana initiative was arguably unclear and arguably prejudicial. But the city of Royal Oak, who did not want it, waited until after the election to object. And the Michigan Court of Appeals said, hey, we really can't get to the question of whether or not this was wrong in the first instance because you waited. And once you wait, we're not going to unwind that which the voters elect. Sorry, can't provide relief. Okay? So that's the precedent in any case. So Wayne County attorneys, I'm not sure how they sort of ignored that, but they said, well, they're just trying to stop the voters from deciding. Well, because if we don't stop the voters from deciding, we allow the voters to have in front of them a prejudicial and misleading ballot initiative where they approved it in a meeting they didn't tell anyone about.
You see examples of similar concepts with, respect to, hey, let's kick this person off the ballot because they lied on their affidavit of identity or they were mistaken on their affidavit of identity. And I think the case law has kind of come out and suggested that, well, look, as the plaintiff, if you wait until the ballots are already printed in order to file this lawsuit, then we're not going to force the county or the city or whomever to reprint all their ballots, that kind of thing.
Right.
I might not be characterizing it exactly correctly, but I've seen that idea pop up in election law. Sure.
And it caused us to have to, right, there's no question. It caused us to have to scramble because I got the ballot.
It is a scramble.
Yes, I got the ballot link. Interestingly, this was approved by the Wayne County Transit Authority on March the 19th. They posted that information nowhere, the ballot language itself, nowhere on Smart's website, nowhere on Wayne County's website, nowhere. Nobody knew unless you were in attendance at that meeting. So I filed a second FOIA. As soon as I got back home, I was at senior spring break with my kids. As soon as I got back home, literally the day after I got back home, I filed a second FOIA saying, I want what was ever approved. And I want that ballot language. They, of course, did what? They delayed, even though it was literally one document. And they ultimately gave me that information on May the 1st. I filed the lawsuit on May the 8th, 1 week later. So we're going to walk into the judge and say, Your Honor, we have been here as fast as we possibly could. And the only reason we're here we weren't here faster is because Wayne County played hide the ball. The other example about this, which many people have heard of, I don't talk too much about national politics, but is what happened in Virginia. So Virginia had a constitutional amendment that they were going to put on the ballot. And this is about redistricting. And I heard a little bit about that. Yeah, at some point. So there are a lot of reasons for and a lot of reasons against. And ultimately, there was something like $64 million spent in support and in opposition of this particular thing. And then it went to the Virginia Supreme Court and they said, this isn't constitutional. This should not have been gone in front of the voters. And the crazy part was they had brought this argument beforehand, and the people that were opponents of it have said, hey, this is unconstitutional. And the proponents said, oh, Your Honor, it doesn't matter. You don't need to rush to make this decision. You can always unwind it after it's the election. And they had the election and it went down. I'm sorry, it was approved in the election. It was supported in the election. And then it went to the court and the court said, like we talked about, this is not constitutional. And the other side, well, Your Honor, you can't unwind what the voters have done. And the opponents of it basically cut and pasted the transcript of the previous hearing and said, remember what he said before? Like, you can always unwind this later. This is now he's saying something different. And the point about it is that $64 million has been flushed down the drain. Okay. There's no way to be compensated for that. The opponents of it don't get to sue the state of Virginia or Commonwealth of Virginia and say, well, I spent $32 million opposing this unconstitutional amendment. You got to pay me back. So as you know, in the case of a preliminary injunction, which is what we're seeking, you have to show irreparable harm. One irreparable harm that we have is if we're out there fighting a ballot initiative that is prejudicial, that is unclear, and that was passed through an illegal open meetings, and there is a section of the Open Meetings Act that says if you do something in a closed meeting or you don't follow the rules, you can seek to have the results of that meeting sort of unwound.
Right.
That is, in
the
fact,
main remedy, really.
That's
That's
right.
the main remedy under the Open Meetings Act, is to have whatever the action was just doesn't, it's undone essentially.
It's undone. Now here's what's the fascinating part. So that's what we're going to have to do. What does Wayne County have to do? Have another meeting. Comply with the law. Notice the meeting properly. Have a meeting. Adopt proper ballot language. They could solve all their problems in a jiffy.
Well, I don't actually know if they could, though, because I would have to go back and check on this, but I think there's a date by which the language has to be approved, and I want to say it's sometime in April in order to get it on an August primary ballot.
Actually, the proofs aren't done until the end of this week. And as you see, for example, as you see, if you saw at the state level, several candidates were kicked off the ballot at the gubernatorial and senatorial level. So there is the ballot language itself the ballots are being proofed presently. So they do have time to just take it off. They have time to take it off and redo their meeting and do it again? They would have if they had done it properly. And particularly after the March meeting that I found out about, I sent a letter to Wayne County, the Corp Council, and to the Michigan Attorney General. And I said, hey, you violated the Open Meetings Act or FOIA, because I asked about this and it happened to you refused to give over any information. And so they knew right away that they had started to do something wrong, and they did nothing. And the suit was filed May the 8th, and they did nothing. It's going to be almost a month where they could have gone in and just, okay, whoops, our bad. Let's redo this language real quick. Let's make it a little better. Let's have a meeting. Let's invite the public. Let's do what we have to do. They could have done that at a very, very low cost, virtually no cost, and they chose not to.
Interesting. Well, I imagine that they would disagree with much of what you've said here. I would be interested, although I don't think that anybody from the county would want to come on and sort of give the counter story to this. But I think I would be interested to see what they argue. What time is the hearing?
2:00.
And what judge? 2:00 Monday in front of
Judge McCarthy, I think.
Okay. Well, maybe, I don't know. I don't recall offhand what I have going on Monday. Maybe I'll pop on. I'm not a journalist or anything like that. I just like to talk about interesting cases that are going on, but it could be something interesting to pop in and listen to and see what's going on with that.
From my perspective, I think the case is fascinating. Okay.
All these election type cases tend to be, in my opinion, very interesting cases, whether you are in favor of the plaintiff or the defendant. They're just interesting issues, I think.
Well, it falls into a greater question, which you have a background in law enforcement, and it's a big one in law enforcement. And the question is, when there's a law that requires the government to do something and they don't do it, who do you go to? What's the remedy, and how does it get unwound? And it's a fascinating, broad question. And I think people have sort of ignored it for a little while because we sort of said, let's kind of let government do its thing. But in some venues, in some areas, they've really gone off the rails a little bit. You and I were talking a little bit about Michigan State University and what they're doing. And it's kind of very similar. Like, you can't do that. And when you can't do that, who has the right to sue? Where do they go? And what do they get when they get there? And is that series of repercussions sufficient to incentivize this governmental agency not to do that again? And I suspect, I don't know what the judge is going to say. I never predict. I will never in a million years do it. I'm a very superstitious guy. I'm a former ball player. And you just don't do that. You don't guess what's going to happen. But the question, I think, is, if you allow the government to have something go on the ballot and not strictly comply with a series of statutes that are very particular about what must happen before something goes on the ballot, doesn't it really mean that all those things don't matter? Because I strictly complied. I tried. This language is only a little bit prejudicial. It's only a little bit misleading. And the question that the average person has is, I don't get that same relief. I don't get to pay my taxes 3 days late. I don't get to pay 80% of my taxes. I don't get to do this and I have to fill out this form by a particular day and I can just show up late, or I want to put a pool in my backyard. I'll maybe get a permit or not. The average person doesn't get to do any of that. The government always requires strict compliance, and sometimes strict and very arcane compliance with its rules. How does it get away with not applying that to itself?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, and maybe something the judge will have to confront on Monday, perhaps. A couple, just to bounce back real quick, I think something that's worth addressing is something that I've not, again, dove deep into, as I haven't really for any of these issues, but I think you sometimes will hear like, well, you're opposed to transportation because you don't want people that are disabled or of a certain color or of a certain income bracket traveling in or through your community. I mean, what's the sense of that sort of thing? And you said that your group, and the people that you've talked to about this that are opposed to the millage come from both conservative and sort of more liberal circles. So like, where does any of that enter into this, in your opinion?
It doesn't. It's a tired argument. And, I've been called a lot of names in a lot of venues in my life. And there's a lot of name calling from the proponents of this. And one of the things I said is, do you think that a unique double taxation of 650,000 Detroiters who are predominantly African-American, do you think, if I said to you, I'm going to tax the Michigan's largest city, who happens to be almost all African-American, I tax them uniquely more than anybody else, wouldn't that be a racist proposition? I would think. But those are not valid arguments. That's merely one of the things. I don't know if you noticed, but a group came out to the city of Livonia and gave speeches, and they were all, and they had a young lady who gets around on a motorized wheelchair in it, and it's very tough for her to get around, and that's completely acknowledged. That it is okay to help this person get from point A to point B. But what this young lady does not do, she does not get on a fixed bus line and take her motorized wheelchair down from wherever she lives to a mile road. Okay. It is to simply avoid, when you have those arguments, you're simply avoiding the objections in the first place. What are the objections? The buses are empty. They're inconvenient. They add to traffic. Throwing more money at the system doesn't solve any of those problems. And they frankly don't even make a really good attempt at doing that. So this is just an attempt to get more money, to plow more money into the system. When local communities make choices on that, I think it's probably unsafe to say, well, they did this for this really bad reason. They might have done it for the really good reason is that it's wasteful, it's inefficient, and it's not a good choice for the people that have made those decisions. That right was taken away. Now we're going to do it at the county level. But we'll see what voters have to say about it eventually.
Okay. Well, folks, you heard it on Unlocking the Law from Matthew Wilk. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the lawsuit, the millage, and things like that. I know that people are going to be very interested to hear your perspective in sort of a longer form than what you're able to present at, say, like a city council meeting or something like that. And I think the legal issues involved in the lawsuit, whether it comes down for your side or against your side, those legal issues are fascinating, and they really do need to be litigated. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I guess, depending on what side of the issue you're on, it's really hard to generate enough interest in something to bring a lawsuit forward on some of these kind of interesting issues, because it's very, as you know, it's very expensive to do that. And, so it's like, how do you litigate these issues when it's so expensive to do it? And there's not really a money damages component to it. So whatever side of the issue you're on, I think you got to recognize that these issues are interesting. They probably at some level need to be litigated in order to develop the case law that gives direction on how to address these types of things when they come up. And it really takes some dedication to be able to do that. But Matt, if people are interested in your group, where would they be able to go to find out more information about your group?
To learn all these facts, and we have citations for every fact that I've cited here. You can go to notsmartwayne.org, go to our website. You can learn all the same things. If you're inclined to sign up and get updates, we have that too. If you're inclined to chip a few bucks our way to help our effort, we have that too. But all those facts are there. And like I said about being transparent as a government, we are absolutely transparent. We are always open to new pieces of information. But the problem is every piece of information we found so far supports the concept that this is a bad idea.
Thank you, Matt. And I just want to say to the viewers and to the people out there, if you are somebody who is knowledgeable about this situation and you come down on the other side from what Matt does, I try to be somewhat neutral. I mean, this is a podcast where I think we like to talk about interesting and engaging legal issues. So if you think you have a different perspective, either on the law or the policy associated with this, I'd be more than happy to discuss whether or not it might be a good idea to get you on to talk about these things so that we can kind of have a little bit of both sides, and not dissimilar to what we did with, Jay Murray came on and we talked a little bit about one side of the issue with the bond proposal, and then Jim Biga came on and did kind of his thing. So I'm always interested in hearing both sides of the story. So please, everybody, if you've enjoyed this and you want it to keep going, leave us some comments, like and share it, tell your friends about us. Thanks again, Matt, for coming on. And we'll be signing off, but stay tuned for more exciting episodes from Unlocking the Law.